Ever chase a vacuum leak with an Edelbrock carburetor and you're not sure where to find it? Well, I'll show you what it could be and a simple fix how to cure it. Let's go. First, let's talk about the combination of parts that have to occur here for this leak to commonly happen. And this deals with the Edelbrock quadrajet style manifolds. Now, this one happens to be the tried and true, been around for, God, I don't know how many years, 40 years, the 2101 intake. And it's got a dual pattern carburetor mounting pad. Quadrajet for the spread bore style carburetor, and it also has provisions for a square bore carburetor to go on as well. And that's inherently where you have the problems with this. Now, Edelbrock makes these dual pattern intakes for small block Chevy, big block Chevy, the Buhogs, Buicks, Oldsmobile, sorry, olds guys, Holden intakes, anything that's a Chevrolet based or GM based engine that had a quadrajet, Edelbrock may make a quadrajet style intake manifold. So that's the combination that usually occurs. It's when you're putting a square bore carburetor onto the spread bore intake. We're going to show you exactly where that leak occurs or where it can occur, because not every instance is always the same. And this one is usually very hard to find. You can spray carburetor cleaner or brake clean or whatever you want around the base of this carburetor, and sometimes it's very difficult to detect at idle. It won't occur until you're driving or there's some more manifold pressure going on that draws it past the gasket. We're going to show you where that occurs and just kind of give you a general idea of what's going on here, and then we're going to talk about how to fix that. Well, let's compare the gaskets real quick, because I think that'll maybe make a little bit more sense too. You know, so a lot of people ask, well, why did Edelbrock do this? Why do they let this happen? And like I said, it's a give and take world. When you get something like fitting the quadrajet style spread bore carburetor on there, you have to give up something a little bit as well too. And what you give up is a really good seal sometimes on that square bore carburetor. Now, does it work? Yes, it does work, but it does take another step or another part to kind of make it all seal up. So that's really the reason why. It's not that they didn't want to engineer it all to fit in there well, but the quadrajet has to function well and has to do its job to seal up, and same with the spread bore or square bore, it has to seal itself up as well too. So that's really the reason why between the two is you gain one with one and something else has to suffer. And in this case, the spread bore, the square bore carburetor tends to suffer a little bit. Let's take a look now at a base plate and see how it fits on there. So that quadrajet style base plate will bolt right up to the carburetor, and it usually does a pretty good job of sealing. I don't really get into too many instances unless the base plate of the Q-Jet has some problems where it doesn't seal up really well, and you can generally see where it kind of tracks around there and really seals up what it needs to really well. And that's what the Edelbrock base plate here, the carb plate, is designed to do, is to really take care of all of those things on the Q-Jet side to make sure that it seals up really well. And if you want to run a quadrajet style intake carburetor on your intake, that's why they've designed these 2101, 7101, I forget all the part numbers, we talked about them earlier, the BOP stuff, Holden, that's the reason why. When you get over to the square bore, like I said, that's where you kind of run into some little tricky things. And this is a little bit difficult to see. So what I'm going to do is let's take an impression of this so we can transfer it over to a carburetor or this, and we'll see where we kind of look at. All I'm going to do here is I'm going to take a piece of paper, try to hold it as steady as possible, and then mark along the edges here. And you can do this a number of ways, but what I usually end up doing is take a dirty hammer. In this case, I've got a body dolly that should work out pretty well, so let's see how it does. All we're going to do is kind of rub the edges here, and it'll tell us where see how it's following the contour of the intake. So I'm going to get all this scribed out, and then I'm going to cut it out, and we'll be back and I'll show it to you. So let me do that real quick. Alright, I've got all this cut out, so should be able to do, if we look here, here's the front. So this is the front of the carburetor, this is the rear, and that's the outline that the intake manifold has. So let's put this on here, and you can kind of start to see where some of the issues are with this carburetor mounting pad on the intake manifold and what happens here on the carburetor. So you can start to see where things get a little thin as far as gasket material sealing up, and it's typically always in the rear. Now when you get into the front side of things, there's usually enough beef around here. Doesn't do it too bad at sealing it up. Remember, you've got all this extra material up top because the spread bore needs to seal up when it's there as well too. That will give you a good indication of what's going on here and why, where that vacuum leak occurs. Like I said, primarily, it generally always occurs in the back side of the carburetor. It's very difficult because the carburetor base plate or gasket does a pretty good job of sealing that up on the carburetor side. Where it doesn't do a really good job is here on the manifold side. So a little more difficult to see that, but when you're talking manifold side and where it seals up there, it will start to make sense if you look at the intake manifold, look at the carburetor, and just kind of see how they all fit together. So really, at the end of this, what's the solution of this? Are you always going to have a vacuum leak? Is it carburetor always going to whistle, and you're always going to hunt and try to find where it's at and try to bring the idle speed down because it's way too high because you're drawing in a lot of extra air? Well, I'll show you exactly what the fix is to this one, and it's very simple, but you will have to buy another part. Let me get everything set up for that. Now, the fix to giving up the ability to mount a spreadbore carburetor is just a very simple steel plate. And that plate just goes onto the intake manifold between the manifold and the carburetor, and it helps seal everything up. So you're going to use those gaskets again. And remember, it's not the issue with so much with the carburetor, it's with how the carburetor and the intake manifold work together. So if you remember correctly, when we looked at this, and you had those issues here where it seals up there, what this does is it seals the bottom side. Okay, steel plate seals this up solidly. Now what you've got is a very square flange piece in the gasket and this plate to seal this up. So now what it's done is it sealed the carburetor to the plate and the intake manifold to that plate as well. And that very simple little adapter plate cures all of those issues. You'll almost never have any other problems with a vacuum leak at that spot anyway when you use that adapter plate. Now again, like I said, that's just for the quadrajet style intake manifolds. It doesn't work on anything else. So there are other adapters like this for other types of carburetors, depending on the intake manifold that Edelbrock has made, the type of carburetor you're going to use, and help seal it all up. So it's a very, very simple deal. These are not that much money. I think right now these are less than $20. So is it a little bit of an expense? Sure. But if you have that 21 style intake manifold or anything that adapts to a quadrajet style of carburetor to go to that intake manifold, it's just a price you're going to have to pay. That 2101 has been around forever and a day. These adapter plates have been around for quite a long time as well too, but now what it does is just helps seal everything up the way it should be. Very easy solution. You could probably make one of these if you had to at home, but for less than $20, my time's worth more than that. So, but anyway, that's how you solve it. That's how you cure it. That's how you keep carburetor sealed up to the intake manifold and make sure that that nice adaptation for the square bore carburetor is all sealed up as well too. Now, the other fix to this is Edelbrock has an updated version of that 2101 in their 2701, the EPS series, which is just designed to upgrade the runners just a little bit. And instead of going with a quadrajet style mounting carb pad, they've just gone to a standard square bore, and it eliminates all those problems. So, again, I know it's a little bit disheartening sometimes when you buy an intake manifold or you get an intake manifold from somewhere or somebody, and that doesn't fit the carburetor you're trying to put on it. But like I said, the important thing to remember here is it's a give and take world, and you're giving up a little bit something, and that's sometimes a little bit of a sealing issue on that carburetor, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work out so well. It really kind of depends on the gaskets as well, too. I think if you use a little bit better gasket, and I'll link the gaskets that I tend to like. They've been around forever and a day because they're a little bit thicker, they're a little bit more spongy, but not too much. And it's sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, but more times than not, I'll always suggest to run this adapter plate from Edelbrock if you've got that spread bore style intake and you want to run a square bore style carburetor. So if you got any questions on this one, don't hesitate. Ask them down below. Like I say, I've dealt with this one quite a bit over the years, and where it's not overly complicated or difficult, it does throw people for a loop sometimes because they'll bolt the carburetor on there, they'll do all their spraying on there, trying to find the vacuum leak. Why can't I find it? It must not be there. I must not have one. You do. You just need a little bit more manifold pressure to pull by that gasket. And a lot of times, too, when you take that square flange carburetor gasket off, sometimes you will see a witness mark on there where it's separated from the carburetor, and you can see where it's kind of going through there. But don't fear. It's an easy fix, and most O'Reilly Auto Parts stores here in the U.S. carry that. If you're elsewhere in the world, you'll just have to kind of figure out where you get that from. But if you have any questions on this one, don't hesitate to leave them down below. And I hope you find your vacuum leak pretty easy. But if you have a square or a spread bore style intake manifold and a square flange Edelbrock carburetor, that's the cure for it. I'll catch you guys on the next one. We'll see you.